Season 2 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place to learn more about homeopathy, deepening your knowledge, expanding your universe of possibility in the world of health and well-being through homeopathy.
Homeo what?
Homeo what?
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening.
Good hello. Good everything.
Good hello.
We're not sitting next to each other like we usually do. It's kind of weird.
I know. Why are we not sitting next to each other? I miss you already.
I know, because we have a special guest.
Ah.
I know.
That's some excitement.
Yep. Let's not announce him until he gets here. He should be here any second.
All right.
We have many things to discuss.
Indeed. Indeed we do. So we're underway, and here he is.
Here he is. Let's go.
We are excited because in the house is there's Dr. Jamie Oskin. Hi, Jamie.
Hey, how are you?
Hey.
Can't see you. There we are.
Can
Welcome.
you see me? Well, good. Well, thank you for having me.
Of course.
Hello,
Of
mate.
course. I'm seeing you.
Denise,
How are
can I launch?
Why not?
Jamie, I really want to hear the story about that picture above your head again, because it does look, it's one of the best images in a doctor's office I've ever seen.
It's the best, but it's where his head is positioned. It doesn't have the same reflective effect. For those who are listening to this only on audio, what you're missing is is it a Norman Rockwell? It looks very Rockwellian.
These were like gifts of my parents when I graduated med school. And of course, the irony is the kid's pulling down his pants to get a shot, which is something we do not do in our practice. And when I had a brick and mortar practice in person, it was always fun to see kids' response, because they may come in and they may think it's hilarious that they see the kid's butt, or they think it's terrifying that they understand what the doctor is doing. Yeah. So on the other wall, I don't know, can you see that one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's the other Rockwell that my parents got me when I graduated school, which is that's a cute one. Maybe I should swap them. I don't know. What do you think?
No, don't swap.
No, that one is so good. It's really good.
I think in this digital age, and especially if you spend time with each other, I think the background's got to remain the same. I think there's something really calming about having, okay, now I know where I am and I can see and relate to all of the things. Dee, what were you going to say?
Well, I'm going to change what I was going to say. Well, actually, no, I'll say both things. You can't see my painting, but the painting that I have over here is the one called The Patient.
Or sometimes called The Doctor.
Or The Doctor. Oh, sorry. This one is The Doctor. There's a companion that is The Patient. And this had come from this was in the Niswander collection. And the other thing that I was going to say is my background is about to change, because on Tuesday, we are picking up one of the Boerickian Tafel wall units that has like the glass top and all of the drawers. Yeah, that has been gifted to us. I can't even believe it.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, benefit of living in Philadelphia where all the stuff is, and everyone knows now that we're homeo hoarders.
Can I just say that now I know what my weekend's going to be like? Because, it's going to be beautiful when you come back next week, but there's going to be a lot of yelling and a lot of lifting between now and then.
Yeah, a lot's got to happen. We were just before we got on measuring, because I have you can't see them here, but I have these two glass cupboards also they were part of the Bornemann collection. And I've had these for a couple of years, and they have all the homeopathy books in them and everything, but they're going to move. The whole office is going to move, which is going to be a mess. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
What are we here to talk about? Why is Jamie here?
Gosh. Well, because we've been wanting him to be on the podcast just so we could yak, but now we have a real reason. There's a conference. Whose idea was this conference? Can we discuss?
Well, this is, it's super exciting. And by the way, thank you to AHE, who's a sponsor, and Denise, you are speaking at the conference. And I can't wait to hear you speak, because you're an amazing speaker. I've been telling everybody. But this conference, so it was born out of this kind of idea of collaborating and cross-pollinating in the profession. And so a bunch of the licensed groups kind of got together the Homeopathic Academy of Naturopathic Physicians, which is the HANP, the AIH, American Institute of Homeopathy, the Homeopathic Nurses Association, and the AVH, the American Veterinary Association. And I happened to volunteer for the committee, good or bad. My wife probably thinks I'm overtraining myself. But of course, I came up with this brainchild for the theme of the conference. Good, bad, or indifferent, the conference theme let me run with it. So, all the organizations signed on to it, and here we are. So, yeah. So the theme of our conference is returning to our roots, utilizing primary homeopathy sources to apply Hahnemann's methodology for consistently exceptional clinical outcomes. And Denise and Al know me well, so they know I love old stuff. I'm not into the new, sexy, shiny, fancy new stuff. I'm into the really old, dusty stuff. Maybe that's why we all get along.
I'm like, same piece.
And yeah, so there was like this kind of this serendipitous bunch of things that happened all at the same time, kind of in time. So one was that in 2019, George Demetriadis, who's the world scholar on the Bönninghausen therapeutic pocketbook, he's also a materia medica scholar, and he for 20 years has been collecting these PDFs that he's been finding online with sources to the homeopathic literature, but also the old school medical literature. And he's acquired about 99% of the citations to toxicologic reports from Hahnemann. So in 2019, he was here from Australia in Baltimore, Maryland at the JHC, and he shows up and he gives me this hard drive that I keep in my desk, safe place, right? And on it is like 500 gigs of information that he's taken 20 years to painstakingly get. Now, COVID happened, everything shut down. It took a while for us to figure out what to do with this hard drive, but the intention was not for it to sit in my desk. The intention was for it to be available, open source, and free to our profession so that we have this renaissance of the literature. And so what happened was, after things calmed down after the pandemic, my good friend, Dr. Elizabeth Rice at Sonoran University, who's teaching homeopathy there, I kind of twisted her arm probably more than she wanted. And she applied for a grant from the Klopp Foundation and got a grant to basically create an online, open source, free digital online library. And I don't know if this podcast is, visual or only audio, but I can actually show my screen if anybody wants to see the library.
Absolutely. Yeah,
do it.
Go for it.
But talk it through, because a lot of people listen to it as a pod, but we can just talk through.
Yeah, we can hum. If you're clicking and nothing's happening, we'll just sing songs and
it's like NPR, where they just talk you through, and now he's approaching the podium. Look at this.
Actually, I just want to hear Al sing.
He's actually pretty good. I haven't seen this new website. Is it launched already?
It launched on Hahnemann's birthday on April 10th. And the very nature of that question tells me why this conference is so important. Because we don't want it to be this library that's dusty old books on an online library shelf. We want them to be actively used, not just for research purposes, but I think what we're going to teach at the conference is, once people learn how to use these resources, it will bring the remedies to life and you will get better clinical results. And so this it's homeopathy.sonoran.edu, and it is the Demetriadis literature collection. And if you scroll down here, there is this library, and it is completely free and open source. So have at it. Oh. And what we're going to be teaching in the conference is how to use the library, how Hahnemann's Materia Medica was constructed, how to read his citations, how to find the things in the library, how that extends into understanding Hahnemann's inclusions in the Materia Medica. Then we're going to extend that into the repertory, how especially Bönninghausen, who was like the first real repertorian, created the repertory, and then how that extends into cases, into real clinical application. So there's three main categories of folders in the library. One is dictionaries, and in the dictionaries, there's I don't know how many. I would venture to say possibly tens to hundreds of dictionaries, and many of them are in different languages. And so, for example, if you really got into some of the scholarly work and you wanted to understand like the terminology of Hahnemann from the time, you would want to actually use German dictionaries of the era to try to understand the language. And so anyhow, there's an amazing amount of resources there. The biggest area we're going to focus on the conference and teaching people how to use are things in this medicine section. Now, the homeopathy folder is very extensive. So you could go into it and you could search by journals, by authors, repertories. And, for example, if you go into this and let's say we pick an author like Bönninghausen, who I like that guy.
No one ever would have guessed.
And you can go here, this is Bönninghausen's Lesser Writings. And, you click on it and the document appears. It's searchable. Or most of the documents are searchable. So you can actually read it there. There may be even a way to download it. Don't quote me on that. But all these books and references are there.
And they're in their entirety. I think this is really important for people to understand, is that when a document just gets like an OCR dump and it isn't the full extent, if you don't have the preface, if you don't have the translator's notes, you're missing the context historically that allows you to not only get to know who the people are, but you also have to understand people's biases. And when we use the term bias in a historical setting, it doesn't necessarily mean a negative way of looking at it, but just rather who are they? What time period are they in? Who are they? Who's their team? What is the context through which? And that's why, so in preparation for today, I was actually, I happened to be reading Bönninghausen's Lesser Writings and, just thinking about, okay, well, what are some of the gems that I love from here? And the first thing I did, because I have read this, many times in the past, but I was like, oh, let me actually have a look, because it's a Beijing printing, and sometimes they don't have all of the prefaces. And so that was the first place I went to. Anyway, I say that because for the students, you really need to get into it. So much of the information comes from sort of the secret little tidbits that come in the author's notes and so forth.
Yeah. I just weigh in as well. Those pre-pages, however you call them, including the prefaces, the author's note, sometimes the publisher's note. The critical thing in so many of our books is that that's the place where the author, once the book is published or finished, says, this is how I did it. This is my logic in going about this process. For example, I don't know if anyone's ever read the preface or the pre-pages to Kent's Repertory, or to, say, even Troyan's Adonis or something like that. But in the same way that Bönninghausen will say, this is how I went about the job, it provides a whole lot of logic and a whole lot of context to what you're actually doing, and really critical. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because, you guys, one of the reasons I just love you guys as friends, but colleagues, and why I think it's exciting to put minds like this all together in one conference is you're so high level in thinking, but you're absolutely right. And when George Dimitriadis created this library, he was collecting, his pursuit was not initially for everyone else, it was for his own studying. And he was trying to find the original facsimile copies. In the original days before Google Books came online, he would actually travel to Germany and go to the Bosch Library in I think it's in Stuttgart. You would know.
Stuttgart,
And scan these documents. And then Google Books came online and had all these scanned documents. But it's actually important to see the original with the original print type and those kind of things, because in updating and correcting our documents, like the Materia Medica, there have been many times that Dimitriadis has been methodically doing it to improve the Materia Medica for our profession. And he's found many errors, and some are like translation errors. And to give you an example, exactly what you guys are talking about, Hahnemann would travel, he moved a lot. And so Hahnemann sometimes only had access to a local library, but he knew the sources and what he wanted to look up. But he may have only had, let's say, a German translation of an English document, and the German and he would include something in the Materia Medica based on that German translation. And when Hahnemann had access, he would always go to the original, but he didn't always have access. And so what Dimitriadis always tries to do is trace back to the absolute original primary source, because let's say it was an English document. Sometimes there are errors in translation that got carried through from English to German and then German back to English.
Right.
And when we see it in the original English, you can actually correct. Sometimes it's like a sensation was wrong or an anatomical location was wrong. But these are things that we're doing George is doing to update and make our tools more accurate. But to give you,
I just want. Is this the point that we just say what's a primary source?
Yeah.
How about we just discuss that, because I reckon that won't be, and not everyone's a geek, and I think that term is sometimes probably misused. Denise, you want to mention? Do you want to go for it, or do you want me to?
I do. And you're like, not everyone's a geek. I mean, anybody who listens to this podcast, I think
that's a good point.
Geek cred, right?
Right?
Oh my gosh, Jamie, you'll appreciate this. One of our students said their kids actually like to listen to the podcast in the car, and one of the kids likes to speed up my voice. They because I talk so fast to begin with, right? So like New Jersey on speed, pretty funny. Anyway,
Wow.
This idea of primary sources it's a really big deal. And as someone who is a recently minted historian, I have to say that when I started my program at Johns Hopkins back in 2019, I would have fancied myself half a historian just because I was always interested in this and had actually been conducting research.
I can assert that. Yeah, there was no way you were. You have pretty strongly asserted yourself as a historian.
Right. I mean, I certainly had opinions about the history.
Oh, yeah, opinions. Sorry, that's fine.
But I knew that I needed the cred because I wasn't really sure what I didn't know. And I would say, and I don't know if this is, if I'm giving myself a ring of the bell too generously, but I would say in the ways in which George Dimitriadis is working to correct issues in the Materia Medica at a detail level, my interest is a little bit different. It's looking at the philosophy and sort of the ways in which things have been reinterpreted over time. So it's the how do we apply the principles has been interesting. And so with that in mind, I really had to learn what a primary source was, because there are these nuances to the understanding. So most simply put, a primary source would be the original material in the original hand of the original author. Yeah. A secondary source would be someone else writing about it. So if you're reading Hahnemann's Organon, that would be a primary source. Kent's lectures on philosophy is a secondary source because he's interpreting Hahnemann. So it's got a new spin on it. Where I think my brain had to have like 4 more clicks to really get in the zone was realizing that even though a translation of a primary source is still considered the primary source, just like you were talking about, Jamie, the ways in which translations can be wrong, can be misinterpreted, whatever, puts a different spin on it. And so most simply put, the primary source is the original. A secondary source is something that is interpolative of that source. But I want to give an example that was, 2 things that were really kind of stunning to me. So one of the things, as a homeopathy philosophy geek, I teach about chronic diseases, and Chronic Diseases, the book. And so I've read Chronic Diseases like a bazillion times. I can recite passages. And then I'm like, wait a second.
And she does.
And right. And I want to do.
In her sleep.
Wait till she has a glass of wine.
Exactly.
Oh.
And we have too.
And then to rap. But anyway, that's another story. Sorry.
Because we have this antiquarian library, right? So we've got 120 linear feet of old books. And when I was working on something, maybe it was my thesis, I'm not even sure. I'm going through all the different versions of chronic diseases. And I came across one that I had never seen. And this is a different translation. So this was the Hempel translation that has a preface by Constantine Heron. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting because this in this edition, there's a quote from Taffel who says it's, quote, mastering the sense of a period and then embodying it in a free matter in the foreign tongue. In other words, Hempel just took liberty. He didn't directly translate. He's like, oh, this is really complicated language. He actually says in his preface, Hahnemann's writing style is so complicated that, quote, I have not translated words, but ideas. Now, if you think about that, right, this is why Demetriadis's work is so compelling, is because he's not just saying, you know what, this is really hard to understand, so it's going to be good enough. Because, like, you're determining if there's sources where it's the wrong anatomical part, like, that's a problem, right? Can you talk a little bit to that, Jamie, and like sort of the like how this has motivated you and the other folks who are, who are participating in this conference?
Yeah, well, and just to briefly tell a quick story, I didn't know that Demetriadis, he's always been a wordsmith, and he tells all these funny jokes that are puns on words, and he does it so fast. As you get to know him as a person, you realize that's one of his endearing qualities, is that he has a sense of humor about words, but he's Greek, so every word, like my big fat Greek wedding, he compares to like the Greek. And I did not know until recently, and I've been, mentoring with him for over a decade. I didn't know until recently he didn't speak English English was not his first language, Greek was. And he didn't speak English until he was like 6 or 7 years old. So he has this love of language and love of words. And I think that is very deeply connected to this work, in addition to his personality, which is very, exacting and perfectionistic. But,
can I just push you on that just before you go on? Was he, because I met George, because George lives in the west of Sydney, in Parramatta. And we lived in the same city for 20 years or 16 years when I was there. And so was George born in Australia and then spoke Greek? Is that because that's a really interesting common migrant story, isn't it?
I don't want to misspeak, so I'd have to ask him.
Well, we'll ask him when we meet.
You're going to find out.
You're going to find out. Anyway, that's totally fascinating.
Now I lost the thread. What was your question?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, because this is how we roll on this podcast. The thread will come back. But you did say how funny he is, and he is. We had a really fun dinner. I think it was that 2019 JHC.
Yeah, Baltimore.
In Baltimore, we went out to dinner with the Radar folks, so with Marco Spiezza and Tim Miller, and then Miranda Castro and Ellen, and us. Who else was there? Oh, Chris Mack, of course. And I'll tell you what, we had some laughs. It was a pretty spectacular sushi dinner, and it was a lot of fun. And he's pretty hilarious. I was kind of surprised, not surprised, you just don't know how funny somebody's going to be. And everybody was having a really good time. And he was just like bang, bang, bang. So I have to say that I really enjoyed the sort of verbal sparring, and his sense of humor.
Yeah, well, definitely. And so, speaking of that, I mean, this is kind of like a rare opportunity in a lifetime to get to meet, people like George in person. I mean, Denise, you live in the US, so I get to see you probably once a year at conferences and Al. But like somebody like George who lives in Australia, we don't get to see him often here in the US. So it's his library, the Demetriadis Literature Collection, that we're teaching about. But he's coming. He and his wife are coming all the way from Australia for this conference, and so there's certain parts that are really exciting. But let me show you a little bit, if you can see my screen.
Yep.
In this medicine section of the library, there are different categories: author, language, and subject. If you were looking by author, it would be like a book by a certain author, like maybe you were looking up a book on digitalis by Withering, for example. If you wanted to find many of the citations that Hahnemann gives, he gives to journals of those days. So those would be in the languages category. Now, I only speak English, so I'm kind of limited. But just by example, if you go into the English book category, then you have English journals, and then they get broken down: American journals, Indian journals, UK journals. And then the UK journals get broken down: Edinburgh, Ireland, London. There are a lot of valuable journals that Hahnemann cites from Edinburgh, especially because if you think about it, University of Edinburgh is where Cullen was professor of materia medica in the mid 1700s. So you keep going down this rabbit trail and you see all these folders, and what we're going to teach you is how you follow from soup to nuts, the citations in Hahnemann, and then get to something like an actual citation where you would actually go and find the book and then find the passage that Hahnemann's citing. And what's exciting about it for me, so here you can see like an example of the journal. What's exciting about it for me is that it transformed, like getting to know the materia medica in this intimate way with the primary sources, which I'll just admit, I feel like a novice in. Like I'm still at the very beginning of my learning process in this, but it is, but I want to share during the conference what I've learned. And it has transformed my practice and the results with patients, because when you see a toxicology report, you see, the spillover effects of somebody taking too much digitalis or too much hyoscyamus, and
that I want to see.
And then you see the time course of events, which we don't see in the materia medica because all the symptoms are broken up.
Yep.
Right.
But you don't see them in the time sequence that they occurred in a real proving. Like first they got nauseous, and then they vomited, and then they had a seizure, and then they fell asleep, like those things, and then they started raving like a lunatic. All these things kind of form an impression and a story in the mind that is so beautiful. And when you see it, you can't, you understand the remedy on a much deeper level. And Hahnemann had this deep understanding of pharmacy. I mean, you may know better than me the history there, Denise. Like he spoke something like 9 or 11 languages. I think his father-in-law had an apothecary. Is that right, Denise?
Yeah, his first wife,
Okay.
Henrietta Johanna. Hahnemann spent a year living he was a chemist and had an apothecary, and that's where Hahnemann started to learn the applications of those principles.
So he spoke all these languages. He was dissatisfied with medicine. He had this experience with the apothecary. And then he quit medicine to translate medical text. He actually knew the literature and pharmacy on a deeper level than anyone before or after him. I think he may have been the greatest pharmacologist of all time.
Yeah.
And when you get to understand the substances in this way, like digitalis, for example, when you start to see some of the main effects of digitalis, you see like the internal edema and the urinary retention and the bradycardia. And it actually produces what's called an AV block, atrioventricular block, and there's a rubric for that, where the pulse and the pulse and the heart rate don't match up. And digitalis is the main remedy. And it changes vision, like it causes something called xanthopsia, which is yellowing of the vision. There are observations that Hahnemann included in the materia medica that were made before him, that he included from toxicologic reports.
Yep.
That now, like drug trials of digoxin, I read a modern article from 2011 that talked about the yellow vision. That Hahnemann included in the materia medica. And of course, they just call these side effects of the drugs.
Right.
They never cite Hahnemann, nor do they cite the precursors to Hahnemann, like Withering or Penkeville or some of these authors that Hahnemann cited. But when you get to know the medicine in that way, sometimes you can pick out a remedy really fast because you understand the main effects of the remedy. And digitalis may be the most nauseating remedy in the materia medica, believe it or
Oh,
not.
wow.
Yeah,
Really?
it produces such a severe nausea and a sinking, like from the epigastrium down, like they feel like they're going to die. There's a great toxicology report by a guy named McLean. He must have been Scottish or something. But when you start to piece together some of these toxicologic reports, and then you could see a case with like bradycardia and severe nausea, and you don't even need that much more detail to know, bam, it's a digitalis case. So,
Love that.
when you start to understand the remedies in this deep level, because you understand the main effects, and then the provings that Hahnemann elicited the finer details, the nuances, the modalities, the finer details that would distinguish hyoscyamus from belladonna or stramonium, then the remedies really come to life. And what that does is it propels your practice. I'll give you a case example that I had recently. I have a child who is like high functioning on the spectrum. He could speak, but he only talked in this silly Jim Carrey scripted language, like from The Mask. So he would mimic Jim Carrey from The Mask and only talk in like movie scripting lines, right? Wow. And he was like super goofy kid, and he also had a super high pain tolerance and some other things. And basically it looked like opium. And I was almost certain I was going to give this kid opium. And then I found out he had a couple of other concomitants. He got migraines with weather changes. And he also had, what was the other concomitant? Migraines from weather changes. He had one other concomitant that was really, he had motion sickness. He would get sick in the car. And so Nux moschata came up. And if you know Nux moschata, it has the silly goofiness, the kind of like lack of awareness and dissociative states. And so this kid, he initially aggravated to a 30C of Nux moschata. And then within a month, this kid started just talking sentences and normal conversation, not like no more Jim Carrey movie scripting, just like talking normally. And he had an initial migraine after the aggravation to the remedy initially, but then stopped having headaches completely. And then and he stopped being motion sick in the car. He started reading. He never showed an interest in reading before, and he started reading. He started playing board games with his siblings, which he never showed an interest or understanding to play board games. Like that happened in a month, like change this kid's freaking life. And when you can see how to apply the materia medica and get like a really dramatic result like that, that's what makes it worth it. That's aphorism 1 of the Organon, right? Like everything else is theory.
Yeah.
And all Hahnemann is telling us is theory all aside and philosophizing all aside. Yep. Our job is to get people better. And the way to get people better is to know how to use our tools better. So if we know our tools, if we have a method for studying our tools and understanding them better, we can get better results. And that in my heart is what I want for our profession. I mean, there may be lots of cool things that come out of this conference. Maybe it will inspire a renaissance of research because of the library. Maybe it'll stimulate, study groups. Maybe it'll stimulate groups who work on repertory work or materia medica work or old school toxicology reports. But ultimately, my wish is that more homeopaths do really good homeopathy and get better results with patients so that people heal. That's the number one thing we're after.
My gosh, I love this so much. This is, I've never been more excited about a conference than this one because it just is like, it just touches my like geek bone to the core. But you actually just said something, Jamie, where something clicked, and I'm going to say it back. I'm going to say it out loud and see if I can make sense of this, because one of the things that I have struggled with in going from sort of the early homeopaths and the ways that they approached their craft to whatever you call what happens with a lot of homeopaths today is there's a difference in complexity and a difference in approach. And I get a little, well, my area of research, aside from the sort of the ancient part of Hahnemann's influences, but the place where I spent the most time was 19th century homeopathy. So from sort of the Herring Lippy kind of argument time, right? And going from Hahnemann's death forward. And you said something that actually just cleared something up for me, I think, because the core argument that happened at that time had to do with pathology. Right. And once you get into the way that pathology was seen at that phase of the 19th century, the beginning of bacteriology, the emphasis on causation, right? There's a move away from the fullness of understanding that you get from toxicology, because toxicology is fully systemic. It's not just going to affect one system. It's a multi-systemic issue. And the reductionistic perspective that informed the pathology of the late 19th century into the turn of the 20th century was based on a completely different paradigm of reductionism, of bacteriology, of virology, of, disease nomenclature, right? Getting the nosology. And so, right. And so I never really put these two things together, because what you see, like, part of my work was going through all the journals, which of course I was like leaning up against the screen when you were showing all the journals. But I mean, I read through decades of all of the journals that were in English from that time period. And I would get to these cases and I'm like, they are prescribing in a way that would be either called keynote prescribing today, which is not what you're talking about. It's a different way of looking at it. You're looking at the most characteristic symptoms. And the way that I'm perceiving what you're saying is in a multi-systemic way, which is what you see from the toxicology. Because if you're thinking digitalis, right? So when you're talking about that incredible nausea, well, we don't really think about that. Digitalis, well, it's the cardiac effects. Once you add another organ system, you get a completely different and fuller perspective, right? This is what I'll use the term to the students is the constellation of symptoms to get them out of a strictly pathological look or a keynote look or whatever. So what you just said married two really important concepts for me. I hadn't thought about it that way. The why toxicology is so important. When you hear that, does that sound right to you or no?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, let me talk a little bit about some of our speakers and some of the presentations, because I think it falls in well. Like, Denise, you're going to kick off the conference, and I'll let you talk about your talk. But after that, on Friday, there are going to be two talks back to back that flow into each other, and we're coordinating the talks. So unlike most conferences where the information is not coherent, like in this conference, we're trying to make everything coherent and build on each other. So the topics, you hear one lecture and the education continues even though you're hearing it from another expert. And so the first speaker is Dr. Wasigi, who's chair of the homeopathy department at Bastyr University San Diego campus. And she is going to start teaching us how to break down Hahnemann's Materia Medica, like how to read it. So it's not intimidating. So like anybody could do it, and you don't have to look at this book and be like, oh my gosh, I don't understand how to approach that book. It's way too stuffy and difficult. We're going to make it like, here's how you do it. And her presentation is amazing. And not only that, when you talk about cases like you were just talking about, where you look at the whole thing, I don't want to give away the farm, but she has an amazing case. She's going to put together all these concepts in terms of like understanding how Hahnemann's put together. And then she's going to end her presentation with an amazing case that just puts this idea together. And then I will give a talk after that. And my talk is going to continue on that deep dive of like understanding Hahnemann, and I'm going to take it into then like understanding some of the grading, how did Hahnemann do grading and footnotes. But then we're going to take a footnote and expand on that idea from this toxicology report, and we're going to go into real detail on that, then compare it to what symptoms did Hahnemann take into the Materia Medica, and then we're going to do a bunch of cases with that remedy so you can see the clinical application. And what you're talking about, Denise, one of the things I'm going to share in my presentation is I'm going to actually show people a case of Hahnemann's, and we're gonna work it through in Hahnemann's. I'm going to show you how Hahnemann solved the case and what was Hahnemann's logic. But this essentially, this logic of Hahnemann that was very well understood by Bönninghausen. Bönninghausen was his best student, and even though Melanie was also probably his other best student, he said, like, if he ever needed to entrust his own health to someone, he would entrust it to Bönninghausen. And Bönninghausen invented the repertory. So to understand how Bönninghausen's mind worked and how he created the repertory, you have to understand that Bönninghausen didn't invent anything that wasn't in Hahnemann. And when we study how Hahnemann solved this case that I'm going to present, it's going to click what aphorism 153 means in the organon. What did he mean by the totality of characteristic symptoms? And how... I'm just thinking now I need to add a slide on 153. This is exactly what Hahnemann meant, what you were saying, and I will show how Hahnemann solved this case and how you have symptom 1 and symptom 2 and symptom 3 and symptom 4, and they all together create a totality that is a symptom pattern that's a syndrome that it's not a keynote. It's like you could have something as vague as weeping or as vague as irritability, but that characteristic combined with characteristics 2, 3, 4, and 5, together make a characteristic whole. And that's what Hahnemann meant by the totality of characteristic symptoms.
Aphorism 153, man, think about the name of our podcast, right? We've got what is the most characteristic? Doesn't have to be weird and strange.
Exactly. And actually, George Mitratis is going to touch on that concept in his talk. So on Saturday morning, George is going to pick up from where we leave off. He's going, on our Friday talks, he's going to pick up and talk more about Hahnemann's development of the Materia Medica, from his early writings all the way through his later writings, from Fragmenta to Materia Medica Pura to chronic diseases. And then he's going to launch into the repertory, which is what he's like a world famous scholar in. And he's going to show us, basically how the repertory was constructed and then lead into cases. So again, our aim is to keep bringing this back to practical application so that if you're attending this conference, you can leave feeling like, oh my gosh, I understand these concepts better and I can get better results. So
this is so key. I'm going to say something really naughty, which of course I always say I do. Except that, but a lot of times with conferences, and Jamie, we've talked about this, like I get nervous when students go to conferences because you never know what they're going to pick up and come home with. It's like when your kids go to somebody's house and you know that they have bad manners and they drink Coke with dinner. And it's like, no, you can't. You can't come back home with that stuff. And we find that sometimes after a conference, the amount of sweeping up of the detritus of, junk homeopathy that they've learned is really difficult. And I've been saying to the students, like, you're not gonna go wrong here. Like I can't wait to learn because there's so many questions, like learning homeopathy. I always talk about Hahnemann having a simple elegance to this. But simple elegance is you've got to really learn what is important and what to let go of and how to prepare yourself, right? It always looks so easy, but there's a real there's this assimilation that has to happen with the knowledge to be able to really apply it. And I don't think that it gets taught very often. I've been working on this book, this compendium of case analysis, for 150 years now. And I think what makes it really difficult as I go back through is that there's the consistency, like in really trying to derive information that's going to be consistent and helpful. It just doesn't exist. Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to go down that road. I want to come back to the fact that I think that students of homeopathy, practitioners of homeopathy need this. We need this. We've gone so far from what homeopathy is, which is this unbelievable, miraculous system of medicine. And it's miraculous when it's done the way that it was intended, right? It's a philosophy and therapeutics that are meant to be used together. Once you separate them and you use the medicine, the potentized substance, in a way other than it was intended, then you don't know what you're going to get. You have no idea.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about the conference. And, I'm biased because I'm helping to organize it. But one of the things we did, we were very conscious about who we invited to speak. And we wanted the theme to be coherent and all the talks to be related and high quality. And, one of the things I lament is just like you said, Denise, I go to a conference and there may be like one speaker that's amazing. I leave Denise's talk all excited. And then I see another talk and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy town. And I think it's particularly difficult for students because there's this guru mentality in homeopathy. And, somebody gets up there and they prescribe a goldfish because a kid liked Finding Nemo.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew it.
And and yet the students don't know because they just look up to teachers, but they don't have a sense of position. And our job as teachers is not to be gurus, it's not to be cool, it's to show people the path that they can get consistent, reliable results. That's science, consistent reproducibility, right? And what we've done is we've put together a conference where all the speakers are super top notch. I mean, we have a veterinary speaker, Wendy Jensen, who is Dr. Jensen. She co-wrote the veterinary the veterinary repertory with Richard Pitcairn, who is like the father of American veterinary homeopathy. And Wendy is now, for the last 7 years, I didn't even know this, she saw me give a lecture on TBR2, which is the Demetriadis translation of the Bönninghausen Therapeutic Pocketbook. She saw me give a lecture about how to use this repertory, and she realized some of the flaws in her own published repertory. And she basically has been a TBR2 prescribing veterinarian for the last 7 years. And what's amazing about that is animals are all observed symptoms.
Yeah.
They don't have like the nuanced worried well psychology that we, sometimes see in, in humans. It's like they have diarrhea and blood and, this symptom and that symptom, and their joints ache when they stand up from getting out of the bed. And, and then they have to work with those observed symptoms to figure it out. And I know from my conversations with her, she gets great results with the pocketbook. So every speaker at this conference has been carefully picked. This guy, Juan Carlos, if you can see my screen, I don't know if you guys have seen him, but he is a medical doctor coming from Bogota, Colombia, and really impressive. He is going to be giving a talk on homeopathic neural regeneration and recovery and linking neurologic cases with Hahnemann's toxicological sources. Wow. So I don't want to give away the farm for his talk because it's too exciting to see in person. But he has, for example, one of the cases he's going to give is a case of cerebellar ataxia with cerebellar atrophy. So that what that means is the cerebellum shrunk. Okay. And the person has ataxia. They like stumble and fall while they walk. Well, he has video before and after. So you see the patient's walking and how the ataxia improved. But he also has pre and post MRI results.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Showing that the cerebellum regenerated and regrew back to its normal shape. That doesn't freaking happen in medicine. It doesn't happen. It's not supposed to happen except for with magic and fairy dust and homeopathy, right? And not only is he going to present these amazing cases, he has maybe two or three cases that he's going to present, and they're all like this level of like amazingness and documentation. But he's going to break down like how did he find those remedies methodically in the repertory and then in the Materia Medica. And so we can see that like the power of homeopathy with like really, really kind of severe pathology. But when the method is applied, we get amazing we can get amazing results and have stimulate amazing healing. So every speaker here, this Kathleen Sloniger is going to be talking about 6th edition posology of the organon. And, I guess I should say something about this woman.
That young lady.
But I mean, I've loved every talk that I've ever heard Denise Straiges give. Maybe you can give like a little 30-second or minute promo for what's your talk going to be about to get people excited about your talk.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have to say, I'm so honored to get to speak at this conference. I literally can't believe it. So my research question is basically, what is homeopathy on a good day? What the hell is homeopathy on a tough day? And the question that I have is basically, how is it possible that with hundreds of years, 220 to 30 odd clinical, years of experience behind us, people practice so differently. And there is so little adherence to what the real anchor to our modality is. And so what I'm going to focus on is, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit before, the time period of the 19th century, from about 1830s until the end of the century, focusing on the arc of American homeopathy and the changes that happened. And what I hope will happen is that by hearing how a lot of our preconceived notions about homeopathy and why it failed in its pattern of success in the 20th century, people always say, oh, the man came to get us. And, it's all about the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, or it's about the Flexner Report. And it's like, no, actually, it's about bad homeopathy. And that when we practice homeopathy as it's meant to be practiced, as you've been saying, Jamie, we get consistent good results. When we practice something else, it's really difficult to get consistent good results. And then people start engaging in all sorts of craziness. And there's a consequence to that because we're working with sick people. And so I think there's an ethical component to our acknowledgement of what homeopathy is and best practices with it. I don't know that we can make our way back into the medical system as a respected modality unless we actually acknowledge what this modality is and carry it forward, right? And so what I would love to be able to contribute, what I hope I can contribute is a corollary to the work that's being done. So it's an emphasis on primary source material. I'm going to show people, through Constantine Herring's actual, writings, through Lippe's writings, through the materia medica of, for example, pyrogen and sepsin, and the ways in which some homeopaths got to one remedy and others got to the other to deal with sepsis. Yeah. And how convoluted the materials became when people are just saying, oh, it's the same thing. We'll just put it in the materia medica. So being the kickoff to the conference, I love the fact that I get to be in that spot, because I think what I'm going to ask the group to do is to consider the why, right? To consider the why of the primary source emphasis, how and to set the stage for the impact that it has on all of us when we can carry forth. And I want to go to something else that I feel is really important, because as I'm thinking about what it took for me to conduct the research that I did, there were some challenges, because there's a thing in the research world about when people hoard their primary sources and they don't let other people see them. And it was really difficult I was able to find enough corresponding materials and enough corroborating evidence for positions that I took. But what George Demetriadis is doing by giving his library to the community cannot be underestimated. The generosity of academic spirit is not typically seen. People hoard their information. Everybody should have to do the work. Everybody should have to find it on their own. That's not what George has done. And I think that if nothing else, people who are like, oh, I don't care to meet somebody. No, you need to meet somebody who has that generosity of spirit it and tell them thank you for giving us the boost. We don't have to do this work. We don't have to go and find everything because he's actually laid it out for us so that we can take this forward. And that cannot be. That just can't be undervalued in terms of the importance of what we're getting from it. And
Thank you for saying that. That just gave me the chills. And, I keep going back to why is this important? Because people are like, I don't know. It's like really old stuff. Like, do I really need that information? And, I keep going back. Yeah.
Yeah.
You really believe in aphorism 1 that your job is to help people heal. Your job is to use the best tools and then get the best results. And that's what we're going to break down and make easy and digestible and not intimidating. And so everybody can do it. I don't know how long we have, but I have a few more things to talk about with the conference, if that's okay.
Please do.
No worries. Keep going. Let's talk.
So one cool thing we have on Sunday afternoon, there will be an active learning skill building workshop. And we're going to be doing, because we recognize as educators that, there's only so much you can learn by passively having somebody talk at you, and that you have to actually engage in the activities to learn. So we're going to have, it's going to be casual. If you want to leave and go get a coffee or something, come back, that's okay. But we're going to be giving exercises and working through them as a group. And some of those will be exercises to practice finding sources in the library, and some will actually be doing a lot of clinical cases. And since many people are new to the Bönninghausen Therapeutic Pocketbook and don't know that repertory as a tool, and we're teaching how to use that tool in this conference, we are working to get everybody free 30-day access to Dimitriadis has a standalone version of the repertory. It's also available in Radar Opus and in Synergy. But for his standalone software company, we are working to get everybody who attends the conference 30-day access so that during the workshop, you can actually practice and participate and actually learn how to use the repertory and get the skills. If you want to then decide you like it and you want to purchase it either from them or Radar or Synergy, that's up to you. But we want everybody to feel like they have the opportunity to gain the skills. So that's one of the coolest things about the conference. And so that's kind of culminating because it's Sunday afternoon. So all the theoretical stuff building up to that, then we get to actually practice our skills. Mm-hmm. On the homepage of the website, some things to point out. Obviously, you can purchase it. There's a discount, a early bird discount before August 27th. If you are a member of the AIH, HAMP, AVH, or HNA, you can also get a $50 member discount through your association. Check back with your association. We are applying for continuing medical education for CCHs, naturopaths, and veterinarians. Students get a discount, and the student discount is pretty steep. Plus, you get the additional $50 early bird discount. And I am working to coordinate. I have a student contact at Sonoran University. So I know students a lot of times don't have a lot of funds and it's a big trip to make. So if you want to couch surf with some students in Tempe, Arizona, we can coordinate that. So please, students, if you're listening, let us know. We will connect you and try to make that happen so you have a rich, exciting experience there too. Space is limited at the actual in-person conference. It's available both virtually and in person, but we only have 180 seats in person. So please sign up now before they're gone. And there's also a free lecture. I gave a lecture on just kind of demonstrating what the type of information we're going to present at the conference. If you want that, you can get it here on the website. We also have another free lecture coming up August 19th at 2 p.m. West Coast time. As a preamble, George Dimitriadis is giving a free lecture as a teaser to the conference, and it's a post-stroke case. That'll be a really kind of fascinating case, and he's going to go into the literature to show us how he helped that patient.
Awesome. I'm going to stop you for one sec. For people who are just listening, we'll put the information in the show notes, but it's homeopathyyusa.org /2024 collaborative conference. And you can get there if you just need a shortcut, go to the AIH website. Can you get it through the Sonoran University website?
I'm not sure if it's on the Sonoran, but definitely AIH, which is homeopathyyusa.org.
Yeah. So we'll get it in the show notes for you as well.
So awesome. So this is actually, if you're looking at the actual video, not the audio, I'm showing a picture of the LIMS Commons, which is the building where our conference will be located. It's a beautiful new building. And our conference website also has all our event sponsors. Thank you very much. Just AHE is a sponsor, and many other companies that, these events are expensive to put on, and we wouldn't be able to do it without them. The schedule is posted on the website, which you can read to see what the days and times of all the speakers are, what food and beverage is included in the conference and what is not. And that brings me to another point, which is probably the most fun of any conference, is seeing your friends in person. Like, it's always a party if Al and Denise are there. But really, I mean, in addition to like super high quality learning content, for me, almost inevitably the most value that comes out of a conference is being there in person and collaborating, and the talks that happen in the bathroom or at the coffee station, where some offhanded conversation starts and it leads to some totally new, beautiful project in homeopathy, or just like connecting with friends. I mean, those are the most fun parts.
Totally. That cannot be underestimated. I want to go back to what you said about the Sunday, which the hands-on, when at the Joint American Conference last time, Al and I got four talks in a row on research, right? And the third one was Elizabeth Rice, who you mentioned. Betsy Rice she's amazing. She is such a great teacher. Anyway, and so she did a talk on how to read a research paper. We asked her to do a hands-on thing, and I learned so much. And, this is what I do as part of my work. But when you hear somebody else teach it, you never know where your skill building is going to come. And I got so much out of it. And sitting there in the room with all of our colleagues who were there interested in upskilling was amazing. So I want to point out that this isn't just for students, right? That if you are a homeopath and you have been working through one particular lens, or maybe you don't have sort of primary research skills or whatever the case may be, the learning and doing it with your colleagues, it's so inspiring. I think that was the highlight of the conference for me was Betsy's presentation. That 90 minutes, I got more out of that. And sitting there at a table with, 8 of my friends and colleagues helping each other to problem solve brought us to just a different level of collaboration. And it's kind of like a trust building thing too, because you go, wait, I don't know how to do this. And somebody else is sitting there and they're like, wait, you don't know how to do that? Well, I'll show you. And then all of a sudden you've got like this different kind of collaborative friendship. Can't be underestimated.
Absolutely. And that's the spirit that we want to embody, is like, we're all in this together and we're learning and we're going to all be better and lift each other up. So the conference is in Phoenix, September 20 to 22. On our conference website, there's directions to Phoenix. The library online is online at Sonoran University, but to pull this whole thing together, we're actually making the conference in person at Sonoran University to kind of highlight all the beautiful things happening there. And so you can fly in. There are a couple airports in Phoenix. The main one is Sky Harbor Airport. And there's going to be free parking at the university campus. We have information on the website where to park, hotel reservations. We have bulk rate discounts at some local hotels. But also, if you like Airbnb, you could get an Airbnb with some friends and party it up. And we will be having some good social events. So Friday night, there's going to be a gathering for naturopathic doctors and naturopathic students. Saturday night is going to be an all-conference event. And we're also, if you haven't seen it, we will be having a private screening of the film Introducing Homeopathy Saturday night. Saturday evening, we're going to have a little social gathering, a little party, shindig, and then a screening of this film, which is currently in negotiations with Netflix. I know many people saw it at the last JHC conference, but if you have not seen it, now is a great opportunity to get a free private screening. So I think those are all my notes about things I really want to talk about. But
I love it. How hot is it going to be? Just so I have to start preparing.
I mean, right now is really hot in July. By the end of September, it will probably be in the 90s.
Okay. So not 120 degrees.
It should not be, although we can't always predict, but usually it's in probably the high 90s in September, mid to high 90s.
I love
We
it.
get a big break in October.
All right. This is great. I can't wait.
Yeah, me neither. There's a funny old thing that happens is as you get older and sometimes not wiser, maybe just a bit cynical. There's an inverse proportion of learning that happens when you go to conferences. But this is the first conference in years that I'm going, oh wow! So I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there as a participant, but I'm going to be schmoozing. I'm going there with my notebooks. As research director at Home Foundation, I'm going to be taking those notes. And like you said, Jamie, the projects, the things that happen 5 years later are often the things that do happen in the corridors, those conversations. It's exactly right. So I'm going to love it. Yeah.
This is exciting. Thank you for coming on the podcast with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me and, sharing and helping us, spread the word about this amazing conference, and also for being sponsors of the conference and, a speaker at the conference. We are really honored. Like I said, every speaker is top notch and like an expert in the field. And when we were looking for speakers, it was like such a no-brainer. Like, I have to ask Denise, and I was very, very, honored and happy when I got an email back saying she accepted. So
heck yeah. Are you kidding? Someone told me that you referred to me as a firecracker.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
It's like the New York thing, the Italian thing, the Sicilian thing. I tell people, you might make them laugh, you might make them cry, but you'll enjoy her talk.
Thank you for that. I'm really excited. I started listening to your Ipecac talk. I haven't gotten all the way through it because I was listening to it while I was walking my dog, and I'm like, no, actually, I need to sit down and I need to watch it and actually focus on it. It's that's what the content I think is going to be like at this conference. It's really, I don't know, it's an opportunity for us to upskill and enjoy it. So this is going to be my weekend. I'm going to set aside some time for the Ipecac lecture, your free lecture. Everybody should watch it. You're really going to learn a lot. I was like 15 minutes in. I'm like, no, I actually need to sit down and really get everything I can out of it. So,
well, thank you so much. And thank you for having me. And, I can't wait to party in September.
Can't wait. Thanks, Jamie. We'll see you soon.
Take it easy. See ya.
Home Foundation is hard at work. The practitioner-generated research network is like nothing the homeopathy community has seen before. Through the PGRN, we will be able to bring groundbreaking research to the world that will help protect homeopathy for generations to come. Learn more about how you can contribute to research at homefoundation.org. That's home, HOHM, foundation.org.